world. I love cow parsley, and round about the middle of May, it is one of the great glories, not just of this garden, but of the English countryside. But it is also a bit of a thug. It's become a weed here in the spring garden. And whilst I don't want to get rid of it, I do want to slightly thin it out because other plants struggle to compete with it. Mind you, you'd be pushed to find anything that would swamp the crown imperials. These are the kings of the garden this Easter. But you don't have to look very far for delight at this time of year. The garden is just filling with glory. Mind you, it's filling with work too. And that's just as well, because we have a full hour in which to relish the garden this Easter time. On tonight's programme, Nick Bailey has got all you need to know to get your lawn looking immaculate for the season ahead. We pay our first visit to Adam Frostgarden, and he's focusing his attentions on creating a large herbaceous border. And Carol Klein visits Waterbury Gardens to learn more about one of her horticultural heroines, Beatrix Havergill. And of course, we've got lots more to come from Longmeadow. Come on. Fruit garden is now fully structured. In order to grow as many different fruits as I can, to create a kind of fruity garden that will be ornamental but really productive, and also to grow makes a kind of fruity hedge. Now I've got the structure for climbing plants. Blackberries, tayberries, loganberries, I can start planting those. In terms of the structure, it wants to be at least 6 foot high. So if you're using posts, these are 8-foot posts, which are 2 foot in the ground. They're also chestnut. In practical terms, chestnut rots very slowly in the wet. But you can use metal if that's what you want, and you can certainly grow them up against a fence, as long as it's nice and strong and 6 foot tall. But I have used these wires because you do need this wire with strainers at both ends, which means you can tighten it because the wire inevitably slackens. Right, I'm going to start with a tayberry. Tayberry is a cross between blackberry and raspberry, which was made in 1979. And they're an improved version of the loganberry, so that they are big fruit, they're juicy, they have the vigour of a blackberry, but a lot of raspberry about them, and the fruits, of course, are bright red. But I will only plant one to each bay. About 8 to 10 foot apart is right to let the plant grow vigorously, and that will fill the whole of that bay ready for fruiting. And planting them is easier with my jacket off. The ground has been dug and some compost rotivated into it. But what you do want is quite good drainage. So if you've got wet, heavy soil, you may need to add some grit or sharp sand, and any organic matter is going to help. I have got some mycorrhizae, because that will help them get away. We add a little bit onto the roots, like that, a little bit at the bottom of the hole to get them away. That little plant will grow new shoots from the base. We won't get any fruit this year. The shoots that grow from this will give us fruit next summer. So I'm just going to have to be patient with that. Tayberries are not easy to get from a supermarket because they're not really grown very much commercially. And they're ideal for growing at home. And I think they're absolutely at their best as a jam. That's tayberries. Let's move on to loganberries. Loganberries were an accidental hybrid. and it was the raspberry and the blackberry that produced the loganberry, produced in July and August. Not as good as a really good raspberry to eat fresh, but when cooked in any form, stewed, crumbled, jam, they are delicious. They don't need full sun. You can grow these on an east or even a north fence or wall if you want to. Now this, like the Tayberry, will all be set for a good harvest in 2018. And the advantage of growing them is the varieties tend to be much less prickly, the fruits are bigger, and they're earlier too. You can have blackberries at the same time as raspberries and Tayberries and loganberries. And that's really easy. Just two more things that must be done. The first is to give each plant a really good water. Like that. And then do mulch them. A really generous mulch will suppress the weeds, keep the roots cool as they grow, and gradually will be worked into the soil, and that will help soil structure. Now this is a project which has taken quite a time to get going and will take a year or more to come to fruition in every sense of the word. But Nick Bailey is starting a series of weekend projects that everybody can do. And he sets out with how to make the most of our lawns.
This east-facing garden has got a 20 by 20 metre lawn, but after a winter of neglect, it's starting to look distinctly lacklustre. There are all sorts of problems going on in this turf. There are weeds, there's moss, there's bare patches, there are crumbled edges to the borders. There are all sorts of problems that need sorting out. One of the first things you can do to bring your lawn back to life in the spring is to give it a good trim. Now the turf will potentially have got quite long over the winter time, and if you give it a really short cut at the start of the season, that's going to hamper its chances to rejuvenate and become lush again. So the best thing to do is just lift up the level of the cutting deck a couple of notches. Now, regular mowing will take out most of the nasty annual weeds that you get in the lawn, but there are certain perennial weeds that the mower isn't going to eradicate. There's two different ways of dealing with them. Some people choose to use a weed killer specifically for the lawn. I would always rather remove them by hand. Now, the key thing with these perennial weeds, such as thistles, plantain and out, if you don't want them to reoccur in the lawn. Is one of the lucky is it doesn't have great roots, so it's quite a square metre of lawn I've gone through that was really quite infested. So with that gone and some of the old thatch and dead pieces of grass in there, the lawn's going to be a happier, healthier place. This is a typical sort of problem that you'll find in any garden that's got overhanging trees or shaded areas. What's happening is the turf is being deprived both of light and of moisture, and so it's died out over the winter. And the easy solution to this is to prep up the ground again, open it up with a rake, fresh seed into there, so just a shade mix will work really well. Now usually, with sowing grass, you'd probably rake this seed back in, but I don't want to disturb the old roots or the ground anymore. So what I'm going to do is to use some ordinary garden soil and just do a very light sprinkling across the surface. And that's going to help in two ways. First of all, it will reduce the chances of birds coming down to eat your new seed. And secondly, it means there's a bit of additional moisture which will help them to germinate and establish. Repairing damage to the edge of a bed like this is notoriously difficult. So there's a tried and tested technique that's virtually guaranteed to work. What I'm doing is cutting out a standard piece of turf, much bigger than the actual piece of damage. And then here's the trick. All you need to do is simply flip the piece of turf round. What you're left with is a gap at the back here, which was the original hole or the dead patch. It's a lot easier to contend with when it's back into the lawn. And so you can just scavenge a bit of soil from the bed. And then I'm just going to use a standard ryegrass, sprinkle over those gaps. And then all you need to do is keep it well watered over the first few weeks. It'll quickly establish. And you've got a lovely, fresh, solid edge to your bed. Work in rows across the lawn and gently open it up it means that water, air and nutrients get down to the grass roots and the whole lawn will appreciate it and grow so much better. While I was running repairs at this time of year, it's worth giving your lawn a feed. It'll help prevent it from getting pests, diseases, and it also helps knock back some of the weeds because the grass is so much lusher and so much stronger. And the best time to try and do this is just before rain is predicted or when the ground is really wet. And then the fertiliser will work into the soil and make sure you have a really lush lawn come summer. But taking a few hours at this time of year to feed, weed and repair will virtually guarantee that you'll have a lush patch that you can lie out on in summer. Now that's got to be worth it.
Regular viewers will know that we don't really have a lawn here at Longmeadow. I've either let the grass grow long or cut into it increasingly to make gardens like I have with the fruit garden. And the long grass is looked after in a very particular way because it's ideal for growing spring flowering bulbs in. The bulbs go in and start flowering in February with the first crocus through to now with fritillaries, and in between we have an awful lot of narcissi. They are allowed to die back naturally. Now in the case of crocus that's at least 6 weeks, and essentially we don't cut the grass till July and then we mow it like a lawn. And by the way, this used to be a mown lawn for years. So it's very easy to then have long grass. And I like that mix of long grass, flowers, and then short grass for the second half of summer. And at this time of year, I do get a lot of letters about lawns and the problems that may go with them. And that's matched almost as much by letters about hydrangeas and the problems that may seem to appear with them. However, my guess is that Roger Butler doesn't see any problems with hydrangeas at all because he adores them.
Well, I started growing plants when I was 8. My aunt grew chrysanthemums and dahlias and I quite liked them and I started growing them myself. And since then I've moved on to growing trees and then shrubs, and hydrangeas has become a bit of a speciality. The interest in them commercially sort of exploded about 8-10 years ago, and for 5 years we've been expanding our range and growing more and more different types, and I think we've picked a winner. They're not Granny's plants anymore. So many ladies have them in their bridal bouquets these days, and then they become and have a sentimental value to them for the rest of their lives. they give such a wide range of colour. You know, they start flowering naturally in the spring, and you've got colour right the way through till the autumn, and you can actually cut and dry the flowers, so they have a real long lifespan in the garden. The bunch of hydrangeas that I've just cut feature some mop heads, which is this type of hydrangea, and 2 lace caps and 1 double-flowered variety. This one here is a mature flower of a variety called Berlin. The next one here is Glam Rock, which was the plant of the year a few years ago. In America they call it pistachio, which I think is quite appropriate. I've got a small petalled variety, which is Aisha, again a mop head. This is Rottelkirschen, a German variety lace cap, very nice, reliable, quite easy grower. In England, lace caps sell better than mop heads, and on the continent they struggle to sell the lace caps and everyone wants a mop head, but I like them all. I'm sorry, you're going to struggle to pin me down to one variety. The soil decides the colour of the plant, and these 2 plants here are the same variety, they're Magical Revolution, and the only difference between these 2 plants is the compost that they're grown in. This pink plant has been grown in an alkaline soil, whereas the blue one is grown in it. And of course, if you grow it in a container, it's easy to control the soil pH. And if you plant them in your garden, it's pretty much pot luck as to what colour they'll be in the coming years. They'll probably say blue or pink for the first year, but as the soil affects them, they'll go to whatever the soil type allows. Your best bet, if you want a hydrangea that stays the same colour, is to plant a white one, because the acidity or alkalinity of the soil doesn't affect the colour. The word hydrangea comes from Greek, and it comes from 2 words, one of them for water and the other one for vessel or container. So it's giving you a clue they need quite a lot of water. If you want to grow the very best plants, they need to be in slight shade, in a very organic compost, and they are quite hungry, they need quite a lot of feed. Hydrangeas don't grow very well on very alkaline soils. But if you have got a slightly alkaline soil, sometimes you will find the leaves go yellow, starting at the veins and spreading through the whole leaf. This can be rectified by watering them with liquid seaweed. Paniculatas are fine in full sun. They'll grow virtually on most soils. Some of them grow to 10, 12 feet. When all the plants are looking nice, I feel very satisfied with what everybody here has achieved. I love my plants, and I grow a lot of plants, the plants on the nursery, because I like them so much. And she's right. She's absolutely right.
I will confess that I'm a fairly recent convert to hydrangeas. I was sort of brought up with them as my grandfather, who always called them hortensias. And they are really good plants for adding texture and colour and flower to shade. They're woodland plants, but to get the best from them, you do need to prune them right. Well, the thing to remember, there are 2 types of hydrangea. There are those that flower on new wood and those that flower on older wood. And the ones that flower on new wood, like this one, which is Hydrangea paniculata, can be pruned really hard, just like a buddleia. And that will encourage new growth and extra big flowers. And the flowers tend to be a little bit more pointy than the more familiar round mophead type, which flower on older wood, and I'll show you how to do those in a minute. But with the new wood, you can really be rough and tough with them. So I'm going to cut this right back to there and there. But you can see it's being pretty radical. And that will cut like that. So So I have reduced it to a fraction of its height. That will stimulate new growth, which will have lots of vigour and extra big flowers. The next group, which is much more common, is actually much easier still. Nothing in the garden matches this pear. This is a Perry pear. And when it's fully grown and covered in flower on an April day with the blue sky, really it matches anything in the world. The second kind of hydrangea are both cats and mopheads. I've got a couple here, they're very young plants. This one is Hydrangea macrophylla Lamoth White, which is a lady cap, and we have Hydrangea macrophylla Madame Emile Mouillère, which is a mophead. You treat them both the same. They've got these very familiar caps of open flowers. Leave those on over winter. Don't touch them. Don't prune them until you see the foliage appear. And for most of us, that's sort of the end of March, early April, depending where you live. And then all you do is cut back the old flower heads and stems, take those back to the next really healthy pair of leaves. Like that. Then go around and even it out, removing any broken stems, any that are crossing, any that are crowded or have died. And then you can reduce it by no more than a third and usually about a fifth. So just cut it back a little bit and that'll do. It's a young plant. I want it to grow nice and big. So it's really simple. If in doubt, leave it. If you're not sure whether it flowers on new wood or old wood, do nothing. Have a look, make a note, and then next year you can get it right. This can seem confusing. In fact, the whole business of learning to garden can seem like a mountain to climb. But all of us have to learn from someone. And if there's an inspirational teacher, someone who really fires you with enthusiasm and a passion for gardening, then it's all much more fun and much easier. And Carol Klein has been revisiting garden heroes. And this week, she's looking at the life of Beatrix Havergal, who inspired a new gardeners.
Beatrix Havergal was born in 1901 in Norfolk, daughter of a clergyman. She was thrust into a world about to be torn apart by the First World War. She loved music, but her first passion was horticulture. Not an easy career to pursue for a woman in those days. Beatrix started gardening with the Women's War Agricultural with honours. For Beatrix, education meant freedom. In 1932, she established the School of Horticulture for Ladies here at Waterperry Gardens in Oxfordshire. The school was set in 8 acres of landscaped gardens, but Beatrix's mission was to teach women not only the craft of gardening with flowers, shrubs and trees, but also how to cultivate fruit and vegetables and to tend the land. Mary Spiller was one of her students and came back to teach and manage alongside Beatrix. So Mary, you knew Beatrix very well. What was she really like?
Oh, she was wonderful, really. Very formidable to look at. Broad shoulders, tall, and quite imposing, and talked the whole time. And I know of one farmer, he said he wanted something like, he said, well, tell her. Oh, I wouldn't dare, he said. But, you know, she was really sweet inside, really quite sentimental, and she would help the students if they, I know there were several occasions when she helped to pay their fees because they couldn't afford it and things like that. And she was always interested in what you were doing. But you had to do it well.
Yes.
You were expected to achieve.
She was a great one for perfection, wasn't she?
Absolute perfection. Everything had to be right. Every line had to be straight. Planting an acre of Brussels sprouts in the West Field. Not only were the rows had to be straight, the squares had to be straight, the diagonals had to be straight too.
So they're on a complete matrix.
Absolutely. But you see, it was sense, because if you were hoeing with a mechanical hoe, if the rows were crooked, you'd cut them off. But it seemed a bit fussy.
The herbaceous border that Beatrix created was used as a place to learn by her students. It's still one of the most admired borders in the country. So what kind of tasks were you expected to perform in this long border?
There was never a plan to it. It would change each year. So either in the autumn or the spring, she would go through the border with students, and you'd take a section, and each section was a sort of repetition of the one before, but different. You'd have different combinations in them. So you'd go through it doing any lifting, replanting, moving that needed. So it changed a little bit each year.
And what about staking?
So we staked nearly everything. It was round and weaved them over the top so the plants grew up through them and looked natural. And if there were what she called elbows, that was the bit sticking out that you could see.
Right.
She'd pull it out and put it on the path. So you know it was badly staked. You've got to go back and do that bit again.
Beatrix, or Miss H, as she preferred her students to call her, had three guiding principles. They were order, knowledge, and she wanted to make sure that everybody grew everything in straight lines. And as far as knowledge was concerned, that was all about plants. What they were called, how high they grew, when they flowered, exactly how to look after them. And when it came to skill, and most important of the lot, it was the craft of gardening. How to edge a lawn, how to propagate plants, how to water. She'd have them going along the rows, tapping all these clay pots to see which ones needed water and which didn't. With the equipment she gave them, all this order, knowledge and skill, they were able to go out into the world knowing everything they needed to know about gardening, and with the attitude that they'd go on learning for the rest of their lives. What does water pairing mean to you?
Well, it means a very great deal to me. It means a great deal of happiness. I spent very many happy years here. It gave me confidence. It gave me a life, really, somewhere where I felt confident. It was a very, very happy life here.
What's she given women gardeners?
Oh, she really emancipated them. She gave them a huge amount. You see, the Parks Committee would not accept women gardeners, and she gradually persuaded them, and in the end, her water pairing diploma was accepted by them as a qualification. So really she changed the whole aspect of women gardening. You see, we didn't really feel we were women in a men's world. We were equal to them. You knew you could do it, and that was it.
So her contribution has been immense, hasn't
Absolutely
it?
Immense, yes. I don't think I can think of anybody else offhand who gave that sort of contribution to women in gardening.
I don't know if Beatrix Hathegor would approve of the Mary Spiller was the first woman presenter of Gardener's World. And I'm firmly of the belief that women are naturally better gardeners than men. Now, if anybody has inspired you and is your gardening hero, we'd like to hear the story. And you can contact us via Twitter or email, Facebook. You can put pen to paper. There we go. That'll support the bees. Now, there's still masses to come on today's programme. We've got Frances Tophill's plant that she thinks is the most influential in the last 50 years. We pay our first visit to Adam Frost. He's, of course, been developing his new garden, and this year he's putting his efforts into a large herbaceous border. And of course, Easter is the time above all else when garden centres open their doors and people flock to them by the millions. And Flo Headlam pays a visit to a garden centre with a difference.
I've come to Hume, centre like no other, and the clue is in the name. The garden centre is surrounded by raised beds for vegetables, a wildlife pond, and gardens where people can just wander. But what makes it special is that the whole place is tended by volunteers from the community, led by a few staff like Mark Frith. This is a wonderful oasis. I walked through the front gate and I'm like, wow, it's taken my breath away. How did it come about?
It started way back in 1998. A small group of local residents wanted a green space to call their own, and they were lucky enough to develop a group of volunteers to come together and take over this small piece of land. And since then, 17 years have passed, and we've just expanded and grown so much to nearly 2 acres of land now. We're a not-for-profit organisation. All the profits from the garden centre are ploughed back in to keeping the garden centre open 7 days a week.
Okay. So who comes to the garden centre? Who uses it?
So we have people from all different walks of life, all the way through students to retired professor, who's one of our longest standard volunteers. We work with people with learning difficulties, physical and mental health disabilities, and they learn these skills. So we teach them basics of horticulture, like sowing seeds, pricking out, potting on. These tomatoes that we've got here is a variety called Microtom.
Right.
Perfect for growing on balconies or windowsills. We've got a lot of students growing tomatoes. Is perfect because you get the edible crop as well at the end of it. We just have to tell them that they've got to pollinate the flowers as well.
Right.
Because you don't have insects in your flat to pollinate them. You have to do that yourself. So a little paintbrush going into the flowers and pollinating them around, so you end up with your tomatoes. That's perfect.
That's mine.
That's exactly.
Sustainability is the motto here. Recycle everything, turning pallets into bird boxes and containers. And when they've decayed, they turn them into compost. This is a place where people can come and wander and sit, but here it gives you an idea of what you can do as low-cost gardening. They've got some anemones here, beautiful spring flowers. Over here, in a recycled sink, we've got some thyme, we've got some forget-me-nots. It's just a place you come and go, oh, do you know what? I could do this on a smaller scale in my garden. Their core ethos is about gardening organically and encouraging wildlife. Today, it's strawberry planting time, and I'm helping volunteer Victoria to get the plants into their raised beds. How long have you been coming to the centre?
2 years.
And what do you like doing here?
Planting, woodwork. I like using the power tools more.
Oh, do you? What's your favourite power tool? I like tools.
The drill.
Yeah, me too. Into our planting hole, we're going to put some seaweed pellets, which is a good fertiliser. And then this powder is rock dust, and that's to help with lush growth. What other fruit and veg have you grown and taken home?
At the moment, I've got mint, honeysuckle, cabbage.
Yeah.
And if I'm still in the mood, I can go out and do my gardening.
Yeah. What sorts of gardening skills have you learned coming here?
Different types of plants and when to plant them.
So you get lots of skills from coming here.
I just grew my confidence as well in talking to people.
Brilliant. So you're local and you come here to shop?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Okay, so what are we looking at today?
We're just looking at some plants for some plants that I have.
All right.
So
what do you fancy today?
Fancy something like that.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Alpines will work fine, actually. I mean, they're like kind of free draining soil, so I put a lot of grit in with the compost.
Right.
I would take these anemones, they're so beautiful. I would think of anything else?
I'm thinking possibly maybe something for height. What do you think?
Yes, maybe take two of these.
Oh, these, what do they?
Or Brisha, beautiful. Those two colours together. together
Right.
would sit really nicely.
Well, I appreciate your help. Thank you.
What I love about this place is that all this creativity, all this energy comes from the local community. And that sense of this is for us, we put into it, we gain from it, is just right across the board. I've had a wonderful time here today with you and the volunteers. This is a fantastic place. And I brought something for you. I brought some Jamaican thyme. It's from my mum's garden. She gave it to me and I'm bringing something to you.
Oh, fantastic. And in
Enjoy.
the nature of sharing, here's some prunings that we did last
wow.
year.
Oh.
Here's a collection for you to take away and share.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
You're
wow,
welcome.
that's a lot. Thank
Thank
you.
Garden centres, and especially at this time of year, can tap into that incredible power of gardening to heal, to nurture, to foster a community spirit, whether it's just one or two people gardening together or a community at large. It really does work. Now, coming into this propagating greenhouse this time of year is dipping into the brain and the heart of the garden. This is where everything is happening. Seeds are germinating, seedlings are coming through and then pricked out and put into plugs and pots and grown on. We've got overwintering plants ready to go outside. And for a few weeks, it just really is all concentrated in here. Mind you, we have to move things on. So, for example, these tomatoes are almost at the point where they're ready to go out. Tomatoes are our most popular vegetable. Perhaps one of the most significant plants that we do grow in our gardens. You'll have an opinion on that, but this week it's the turn of Frances Tophill to express her opinion on what she thinks is the plant that's had the greatest impact on our gardens over the last 50 years.
I would like to champion chilies. It's a great representative of our ever-expanding gardening and culinary repertoire. In the last half-century, travel has not only expanded our horizons, but it's widened the range of food that we love to grow. We've taken the humble chilli to our hearts here in Britain, and who can blame us? With a vast array of colours and varying strengths, they can be huge, they can be tiny, but nonetheless fiery. And they're so easy to in our veg patches in the summer. And you don't even need a garden to grow them, which for me, a gardener with a very small garden, is a great asset. They have stood at the helm, charging into our kitchens, our gardens, and into our hearts. And that's why chilies are my choice for the Golden Jubilee plant.
Now, you might agree with Frances that the chili represents the biggest changes in our lifestyle and gardening over the last 50 years, or you might not. That is up. All 10 presenters have made their case, and then we will be giving you a chance to vote. But that will come later on in the year. Chilies take a long time to germinate and grow. However, there are a whole batch of tender vegetables that grow fast as long as they get enough heat. So if you sow them now over the next month, grow them on, protect them, and then when they're big enough, plant them out round about June at some stage, depending where you live. The nights will be warm enough for them to grow away quickly, and then you'll get a good harvest. I'm going to grow some climbing beans and also some courgettes. Courgettes can be planted out round about the middle to the end of May. So start them now. First is Gold Rush. Lovely, bright yellow fruits. Quite easy to grow, as long as it has rich soil, plenty of water. If you sow them directly into pots, you don't need to prick them out. You just take them out of the pot, pop it in the ground. Fairly large seeds. What I like to do is sow 2 per pot, put them on their edge, push them in like that, and then I weed out the one that grows least strongly. You'll find that 3 or 4 courgette plants will give you as many courgettes as a family can eat. What I have done is add to the seed mix some sieved garden compost. These are essentially strong, lusty plants that want to grow fast and big. So everything you can do to encourage that will give you a better result. As well as courgettes, I want to sow some climbing beans, which will eventually also be planted out onto the supports that I put up earlier. And I'm using root trainers. The advantage is they allow for a deep root. I'm going to put that in there. I have two different varieties. I've got a familiar variety I always grow called Blauhilda. They have these lovely purple pods. And I'm going to sow one bean for each root train. Cover them over. Label them. That can go in there. And this is a variety called Neckar Gold, which has golden yellow pods. So we've got the purple on one side, gold on the other. These are plants that look terrific. You could certainly grow them in the border and they would hold their own with any flower. Pop these in here. So now we've started the process of sowing tender vegetables, which will continue right through into June. And it is much better to be a little bit late than too early with these, because a cold spell in early summer really is difficult to recover from. So they'll need water, heat to make them germinate, and then we can gradually encourage them to grow as big and strong as possible before planting them out. Last year, we watched as Adam Frost created his new garden. And we're going back for the first time this year, as he is about to embark on creating a brand new and very ambitious border.
We've been here nearly 12 months, and it's been fantastic. What a 12 months it's been. You might remember the last time you saw me, I was in the barn, it was pouring with rain, and I was drilling these posts, and now they're in. So all I've got to do really, fix this rope, and then I can start thinking about the roses I'm going to plant. Veg garden's done. That's now crying out for veggies. And front garden, actually there's a little bit of furniture out there now, that breakfast terrace. We can go out there and enjoy a cup of tea in the morning. Do you know, there's areas in this garden that we've put so much work into, veg garden, front garden. But I keep getting drawn back to this space in this woodland. I really feel like I've benefited from someone else's work. All I did was literally cleared out the weeds, and then actually after Christmas, snowdrops appeared, aconites appeared. These beautiful little tulips, I think they're tulip sylvestras. This area is really, really stunning. But this spring, I really want to concentrate on transforming my herbaceous borders to make them just as beautiful. I've got these fantastic borders, lovely big south-facing border and my west-facing border. At some point, these are going to be absolutely rammed full of wonderful herbaceous plants. But the problem is here, though, it's full of bindweed, which, you know, as a gardener, it's one of the most depressing weeds you can have. It grows through things, up things, tangles itself around. You only need the tiniest little bit, you know, and it'll just spread itself around. So I'm going to work my way through. I'm going to clear all of the border, and I'm going to cover the border then with black plastic, and then I'm going to mulch on top of it. You don't want to lose the herbaceous plants that are in here. So the plan is to start lifting things. I'm going to put them in pots, put them to one side, keep them there for the season, and make sure none of that bindweed is in that plant before I reintroduce it back into the garden. Geraniums, probably actually one of my favourite herbaceous plants, and so easy to divide. All I've got to do is literally chop through, check it through for bindweed, so that's going to be a good clump of geranium. Tap it down, make sure there's no air pockets. Let's get these across. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover the whole area in black plastic. But if you haven't got black plastic, I mean some old carpet, something like that, anything that's just going to stop that light getting to those roots. I'm obviously just breaking this down in sections, you know, as this is a big old job. But if you've got a small garden, covering up with this plastic is ideal, really. But obviously it's not going to look great. So I've put mulch on, but you could use bark, you could even use gravel, and maybe even arrange, you know, a few pots. Job done. I'm lucky that this border's got absolutely no bindweed whatsoever. So I can get on and I can start planting it. Single dug it, introduced manure, and I've let it just have the winter just to work its way in, which will give me a really, really good base. And then after that, added some manure over the top just to lighten this season, and the worms will pull that in, give the plants a real good sort of start. It's not for timber really, because it's cheap. It's pressure treated, so it's going to last a long time. But realistically, it's going to be covered up by the plants. And all I'm trying to do is stop this soil ending up on this gravel. There you go. That's that done. And now for the fun bit. I'm going to actually start to design and actually create this border. So to give you an idea, the first thing actually I do is pick out all the plants that I want to use in this border. So the colours I want, the textures I want. And I build them up in a mood board. Collect all the images, keep them in one place. And then we measure the border up and we end up with a scale plan. After that, the first thing I do is start to actually add where am I going to have sort of structure through this border. And what you'll realise is actually it's all about sort of a sense of rhythm, I suppose, with a long border. So you need to get these sort of layers of interest that sort of move you along. And that really doesn't matter whether it's a massive border or a small border. If you've got a smaller garden, it might be that those points of interest move around the garden. But where am I going to get my inspiration from? What is this border really going to be about? And my visit to Packwood was fantastic. And I was walking along and herbaceous borders, and all of a sudden I saw this yucca and I saw this phormium, and they were like wow, they'd stood out. But I want to do something different here, and I want the whole garden to have this feeling of food that runs all the way through. So in a sense, my yuccas, my phormiums are going to become edibles. So though it's going to be a stunning herbaceous border, well hopefully it will be, it's going to have these edibles. So, you know, you're going to be out walking herbaceous border, it's going to change through the seasons, and you're going to be able to pick from it and actually then start to use it in the house. But today, what I want to do is actually get the planting in the back of this border. I'm going to add some vines and I'm going to add some more fruits. I'm going to add a few of those along there, maybe a couple of apples to go with those pears, and I'll leave a little pathway, so hopefully we'll be able to actually get in here and harvest this back end of the year.
Well, boy, do I share Adam's pain. About 6 years ago, we took out every single plant and dug it over inch by inch, taking out every last spaghetti-like thread of bindweed root. You really, really do have to attack it because bindweed is not the gardener's friend. However, once you've got your bindweed-free borders planted, up, and herbaceous plants growing lustily, they will need support. Lots of things you can use. You can use strings, you can use canes, you can use pea sticks, but here at Longmeadow we tend to use metal supports, and we make them ourselves. We buy 6mm steel rod, which you can get from a steel factory, and if that sounds like some obscure supplier, it's not. They're all over the country. Look them up. These are 2.5 metre lengths, and the cost of this is going to be about £1.50. You then need a circular, solid surface. Now, a tree trunk does this really well. You can use an upturned flower pot. I'm going to use this ball here. Line it up so it's roughly in the centre, and just bend it round like that. So you have got a hoop. That's the first dimension. Put them on a hard surface with a board over the top. Stand on it, so you've got your weight over it, and then pull up the legs. Hey presto, you've got a plant support. And you push the legs into the ground, and then you can lift them up a little bit as the plant grows. These tend to last, well, I've got some that we made 20 years ago. They are not going to rot. Right, let's go and use it. Whatever you're using to support, the key is to hold the plant up, but not to constrain it. It shouldn't look as though you've done anything at all. So with things like this cardoon, which can be pretty floppy, push them into the ground like that, and try and do it so that the plant looks natural. It doesn't want to look corseted or constrained, just gently supported. And the time to support a plant is before it needs it. Now the weather is glorious today here at Longmeadow. It really couldn't be better. But it can turn on a sixpence. And if it does, plants get bashed however carefully you support them. So let's see what the weather has in store for us gardeners this Easter weekend.
Hello there. If you've got plans to get some jobs done in the garden over the course of the Easter weekend, the weather's looking fantastic colours coming out, of course, this time of year in the gardens. During the next couple of days, things are going to remain pretty cool, certainly compared to last weekend. Temperatures really taking a dip. There'll be a little bit of rain for some of us, but also the chance of a slight frost developing in the most prone spots overnight, particularly across parts of northern England, Scotland and Northern Ireland. During Saturday, this is Saturday afternoon, lots of dry weather across much of the country. Probably the best day of the weekend if you're planning to get out and mow the lawn, for instance. Temperature only up to around about 14 degrees or so at best, so it will feel quite fresh out there. Chance of a few spots of light rain, a few showers across northern England, possibly for Northern Ireland and for Scotland too, where it will feel quite chilly, particularly towards the north where we've got quite a strong breeze, and there could be a few snow showers on top of the Scottish mountains too. Not a bad end to Saturday though, many of us dry and clear. Overnight we could well once again see just a touch of slight frost across parts of eastern Scotland, northeast England, perhaps down towards the Midlands too. Towards the northwest, cloud increases and we will see some rain. That rain will move its way somewhere through the central swathe of the country at that, but probably a little bit of useful rain, a few spits and spots down towards the southeast, and temperatures around 9 to 15 degrees. Bye for now.
Well, whatever the weather is like and wherever you live, there will be some jobs that you will be able to do this weekend. For most of us, daffodils are coming to an end, and they're busy forming seed heads. But this takes energy away from the bulb and next year's flowers. So snap off these seed heads. However, leave the stem and the foliage to die back naturally. It can feel as though the weeds are growing faster than anything else in your garden at this time of year. And as well as mulching and hoeing, the best way to cope with them in a border is to hand weed. Get in there on your hands and knees and deal with them individually. As well as getting you up close and personal with your plants, time spent doing this now will save you a lot of trouble later in the summer. The new shoots of dahlias make ideal cutting material. Choose a shoot that's about 4 to 6 inches and cut it with a sharp knife as close to the tuber as you can. Stick it carefully into a very gritty compost mix. Water it and put it somewhere warm, and don't let it dry out. And it should form roots in a few weeks' time. So wind and the petals are scattered all over the water, and we never appreciate it in all its glory. But not this year. This year, I've never seen it look so good, and we've got wonderful weather to enjoy it in. But I'm afraid, whatever the weather, there's no more time today. But I will see you back here at Longmeadow next time. Till then, bye-bye.